At dinner, my son-in-law struck my daughter again and again and pushed her back in her chair. His mother sat there smiling, and she said, "That's how she learns." My blood ran cold. I stood up without a word, took out my phone, and made one call. They had absolutely no idea who they were really dealing with. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're listening from tonight. And if you believe a woman should never be humiliated at her own table, stay with me. Because what followed that call changed every life in that room. My name is Alina Vance. I am 57 years old. I have been a family law attorney for 32 years. The woman on the floor that night was my only child, Ariana Vance, my daughter. The man who hit her was her husband, Mark Harrison, my son-in-law. And the woman applauding was Helen Harrison, Mark's mother, my daughter's mother-in-law. My late husband, Robert Vance, had always warned me that character reveals itself in small moments. I just didn't realize how right he was until it was too late. It was Sunday, March 20th, Robert's birthday. He had passed away 2 years earlier from a sudden heart attack. That house I lived in had been too quiet ever since. Ariana insisted I not spend the evening alone. "Mom, please come over," she said. "I'll make Dad's pot roast." Her voice sounded steady, warm even. But when I arrived at the house she shared with Mark, something felt staged. Candles perfectly aligned, crystal glasses polished. Helen Harrison already seated at the table as if she owned the space. Helen had always carried herself like royalty, soft voice, measured tone. The kind of woman who never raised her volume, just her influence. "Alina, dear," she greeted me sweetly. "What a lovely evening." Mark kissed Ariana's temple in front of me, a rehearsed gesture, public affection. Ariana smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She was wearing long sleeves despite the warmth inside the house. Her shoulders curved inward slightly. Her hands trembled when she handed me a plate. As a lawyer who had spent decades defending women in domestic abuse cases, I recognize posture before bruises. I just never imagined I would see it in my own daughter. Dinner began quietly. Helen commented on the seasoning. Mark corrected Ariana twice over insignificant details. When Ariana laughed at something I said, Mark's hand slid under the table and squeezed her thigh. Hard, I saw her flinch. He smiled at me as if nothing happened. I told myself not to overanalyze. That was my first mistake. Then Ariana reached to refill Mark's water glass. Her hand shook. One drop spilled. Mark slowly placed his fork down. The sound was sharp against porcelain. "Ariana," he said calmly, "look at what you did." "I'm sorry," she whispered. The first strike came fast. The second echoed. The third pushed her backward. Her chair tipped. She hit the marble floor. And then Helen clapped. Actually clapped. "That's how she learns," Helen Harrison said, watching her son as if he had done something admirable. In that moment, I understood something terrifying. This was not the first time. My blood didn't boil, it froze. 30 seconds. That's how long I stood there. 30 seconds watching my daughter on the floor. 30 seconds watching my son-in-law steady his breathing. 30 seconds watching his mother nod in approval. Then I stood. I did not scream. I did not argue. I did not plead. I reached into my purse and dialed a number I have kept on speed dial for 2 decades. "Commander Miller," I said when he answered. Commander Miller is a senior officer in our city's police department. Over the years, we had worked together on several domestic violence prosecutions. "This is Alina Vance. I need immediate response at 345 Palm Avenue. Domestic assault in progress. I am activating audio recording now." I placed the phone face up on the dining table. "Mark," I said evenly, "repeat what you just did." His face drained of color. Helen's smile disappeared. "You can't," Mark began. "I can," I replied, "and I just did." I knelt beside Ariana. Her cheek was already swelling. "Look at me," I whispered softly. "It ends tonight." She began crying, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the sound of someone whose silence had finally cracked. Helen stood abruptly. "This is a family matter." "No," I said, rising slowly. "It's a felony." Mark stepped toward me. "Do not take another step," I said calmly. "Officers are on their way." That changed the atmosphere instantly. Helen's confidence flickered. Mark's jaw tightened. Ariana struggled to sit upright. In the distance, faint sirens began to rise. Helen leaned toward me and whispered, "You are overreacting." I looked directly at her. "You applauded." She said nothing. The sirens grew louder. Mark turned toward Ariana. "You're ruining everything," he muttered. "No," I said firmly, "you already did." When officers entered the house, Commander Miller was first through the door. He looked at Ariana, he looked at Mark, he looked at Helen. He didn't need an explanation. Mark Harrison was placed in handcuffs within minutes. Helen protested loudly until an officer informed her that encouraging assault can qualify as complicity. For the first time that night, Helen Harrison looked afraid. As Mark was escorted out, he turned toward me. "This isn't over." I held his gaze. "You're right," I said. "It's just beginning." Because what neither my son-in-law nor his mother understood yet was that I had built my entire career dismantling men exactly like him. And this time, I wasn't representing a client. I was representing my daughter, and what happened the next morning proved something I had not yet considered. That dinner was only the surface. Beneath it was something far darker, and someone was already preparing to fight back. The house was too quiet after they took Mark away, not peaceful, just stripped. Ariana was sitting on the edge of her bed when I walked in. She hadn't changed out of her dinner clothes. Her hands were wrapped around her elbows as if she were trying to hold herself together. "Mom," she said softly, "did I just destroy my marriage?" I closed the door behind me. "No," I said, "he did." The first time he raised his hand, she looked down at the carpet. "It wasn't always like this." That sentence, I have heard it from hundreds of women. It wasn't always like this. It never is. I sat beside her and gently lifted her chin so she would look at me. "When did it start?" I asked. She hesitated. "About a year ago," she whispered. "Maybe earlier." That meant I had missed signs. Mark Harrison had been charming when he first came into our lives. Attentive, polished, he spoke respectfully, brought flowers, listened carefully when I talked about my cases. But I had noticed something even then. He interrupted Ariana subtly, corrected her stories, shifted conversations back to himself. And Helen Harrison, his mother, always watched silently from the side like a chess player observing a match already planned. "Did he hit you before tonight?" I asked quietly. Ariana nodded. My heart didn't shatter, it hardened. 3 months ago," she said. "It was an argument about money. He pushed me, then he apologized. Said he was stressed. And Helen, she told me not to provoke him." Of course she did. Helen Harrison had applauded tonight. "You don't applaud something that shocks you, you applaud something that feels normal." I stood up slowly. "This ends now," I said. Ariana's breathing quickened. "He said he'd ruin us," she whispered. "He said his family has connections." I gave her a steady look. "So do I." The next morning, I drove Ariana to the police station. Commander Miller was already waiting. He greeted me professionally, but when he saw Ariana's bruised cheek, his jaw tightened. "We'll process the assault charges," he said. "But Alina, Mark's uncle, is a district judge." I didn't blink. "I'm aware, and Helen Harrison," he continued. "She's very active in political fundraising circles." "I'm aware of that too," he nodded once. "Then we do this clean, by the book." "By the book," I agreed. Ariana gave her statement calmly, too calmly. When she finished, she looked smaller somehow. "Do I have to testify?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly, "but you won't be alone." We filed for an emergency protective order before leaving the station. That should have been enough. It wasn't. By noon, my phone started ringing. First, it was an unknown number. "Alina," a refined female voice said, "this is a misunderstanding." "Who is this?" I asked. "Christine Davis. A close friend of Helen Harrison." "Of course, I'm calling as a friend," she continued. "Young marriages are complicated. We don't want this to become public." "It already is," I said calmly. "There is a police report." A pause. "You should reconsider. Mark's career could be destroyed." My daughter's face was already damaged. Her voice cooled. "You may regret escalating this." I ended the call. By afternoon, Ariana's phone began lighting up. Missed calls from Mark, texts from unknown numbers. "I'm sorry. It was a mistake. You know I love you." Then the shift. "You're overreacting. Your mother poisoned you against me. Don't do this." Classic cycle, apology, minimization. Blame, fear. I took her phone gently. "You block them all." She hesitated. "What if he really changes?" "Change requires consequences," I said, "not forgiveness without accountability." That evening, we returned to her house, escorted to collect essentials. The front door was intact. The house was quiet, but the air felt different. Violation leaves residue. As Ariana packed a suitcase, she suddenly froze. What? I asked. My laptop, she said. It was gone. Along with her external hard drive, important files, personal photographs, work documents. Did you give him access? I asked. She nodded slowly. He knows all my passwords. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Control. Isolation, digital surveillance. Mark hadn't just hit her, he had been tightening control for months. When we left the house, I noticed a car parked across the street. Engine running, dark windows. It pulled away as we drove off. I didn't mention it to Ariana, not yet. The next morning, something worse happened. Ariana received a call from her supervisor at work. Given the circumstances, he said carefully, we think it would be best if you took temporary leave. For how long? She asked. Until this situation settles? I knew what that meant, reputation management. Helen had already started working the narrative. By lunchtime, social media posts began appearing. False accusations ruin lives. Innocent men are victims too. Anonymous comments under Ariana's old photos. You're destroying a good man. You'll regret this. A smear campaign, organized, strategic. Helen Harrison didn't scream, she strategized. That evening, I sat alone in my study while Ariana slept. I opened my laptop and started pulling records, corporate filings, property deeds, charitable foundations. Helen's name appeared everywhere. Money moves quietly. Influence moves faster. Then I found something interesting, an old news clipping from 11 years ago. Local engineer dies in staircase fall. The engineer's name was Ray Harrison. Helen's husband, Mark's father, accidental death, closed investigation. But something about the wording bothered me. Inconsistent injury pattern, one small paragraph mentioned before being dismissed. I leaned back in my chair. Patterns. They repeat. I made a call. Commander Miller, I said when he answered. Yes, I need you to reopen something. What kind of something? A death from 11 years ago. There was a pause. Alina, that's a heavy door. I know. I stared at the photo of Ray Harrison on my screen, a man smiling beside a much younger Helen. If I'm right, I continued, this dinner wasn't the beginning. What are you saying? He asked quietly. I'm saying violence in that house didn't start with my daughter. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll look into it. I ended the call and sat there in the dim light of Robert's old study. My late husband had always told me something. When people show you who they are, believe the pattern, not the performance. Mark had shown us violence. Helen had shown us approval. But what they didn't understand, what they still didn't understand, was that I had just stopped playing defense. And when I move from defense to strategy, I don't just protect, I dismantle. But the next morning, when I opened my email, I realized something chilling. They had already started their counterattack. And this time, they weren't aiming at Ariana, they were aiming at me. The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. Subject line. Formal complaint, immediate review required. It was from the State Bar Association. For 32 years, my professional record had been spotless. That morning, it was under investigation. I read the complaint once, then twice. Allegations of unethical conduct, abuse of professional influence, conflict of interest for representing my own daughter in a criminal matter. I didn't need to guess where it came from. Mark Harrison may have lost control in that dining room, but Helen Harrison never did. Ariana was still asleep when I closed my laptop. For a moment, I allowed myself to sit in the quiet. This wasn't retaliation, it was strategy. If they couldn't intimidate my daughter back into silence, they would attempt to destabilize the one person standing beside her. Me. By 8 o'clock, my assistant Lucy called in a panic. Attorney Vance, there are 2 men here from the IRS. Of course there are, I replied evenly. They have a warrant to audit firm records. Let them in. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. Because smear campaigns don't operate on one level. They operate on 3: reputation, income, licensing. Helen Harrison was striking in all directions at once. When Ariana woke up, I told her the truth. They're trying to scare you into dropping the charges, she said quietly. They're trying to scare you into asking me to, I corrected. She looked at me carefully. I won't. There it was, the first real shift in her voice. Not fear, resolve. By noon, social media had escalated. An anonymous blog had published a story titled, When False Accusations Destroy Good Men. No names mentioned directly, but details specific enough that anyone in our circle could connect them. There was even a blurred photograph of Ariana leaving the police station. Someone had been watching. Helen moved quickly. I recognized the architecture of public manipulation. Years ago, in a high-profile domestic violence case, I had watched a powerful family attempt the same tactic. They failed, but only because the victim didn't break. I looked at Ariana. She was scrolling through comments under her old photos. Strangers calling her unstable, manipulative, attention-seeking. Her breathing grew shallow. "Stop reading," I said gently. "It feels like they're rewriting my life," she whispered. "They are," I said calmly, "because truth threatens them." That afternoon, Commander Miller called. "We've located Mark's laptop," he said. He was still logged into Ariana's cloud accounts. "Accessing them?" "Yes," my jaw tightened. Control didn't end with handcuffs. Mark Harrison had built his marriage on surveillance. "Add cyber harassment," I said. "Document everything." "Already done." There was a pause. "And Alina, yes, about that old case you asked me to look into, Ray Harrison's death." My body stilled. "What did you find?" "The original coroner's notes suggest repeated blunt force trauma. Not a single fall." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Was it investigated?" "Closed within weeks, signed off by a judge." "Which judge?" Silence. "Henry Harrison, Mark's uncle. Of course, family protects family. Especially when the family secret is buried beneath marble stairs." After I ended the call, I didn't move for a long time. Helen Harrison had applauded her son's violence like someone who had normalized it decades ago. Violence that doesn't shock you is violence you've lived with or delivered. That evening, Ariana came into my study. "Mom," she said softly, "what if this never stops?" I looked at her carefully. "It will." "How?" "Because people who operate through fear eventually make mistakes. And if they don't," I leaned back in Robert's chair, "then we outlast them." Ariana sat across from me. "I keep thinking about what Helen said at dinner," she whispered. "That's how she learns." She swallowed. "She wasn't talking about water on a tablecloth." "No, she wasn't. She was talking about obedience," I said. Ariana nodded slowly. "I don't think that was the first time she watched him hit someone." The air in the room shifted. Because once you say a truth aloud, it grows weight. That night around 10 p.m., my phone rang again. "Unknown number," I answered. "Alina," Helen's voice said smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd call," I replied. "You've made quite a spectacle. You applauded assault. It was discipline." "No," I said calmly, "it was a crime." A soft chuckle. "You think you're powerful because you know the law." "I don't think," I said evenly. "I know." There was a pause. "You are jeopardizing your own career over a misunderstanding." "My career can withstand review." "Can your daughter withstand public scrutiny?" she asked lightly. There it was, the threat wrapped in silk. "You raised your son to believe control is love," I said. "You raised your daughter to challenge men publicly," she shot back. "No," I corrected. "I raised her to know she has rights." Helen's tone cooled. "You should reconsider before this escalates further." "It already has," I replied. 11 years ago." Silence. "The first crack." "I don't know what you're implying," she said slowly. "I think you do." She ended the call. I stared at the dark screen. Patterns. Patterns never lie. The next morning I received confirmation. Ray Harrison's case was officially being reviewed, not reopened yet, but flagged. Helen would feel that shift. And when powerful people feel pressure, they panic. 2 days later, the panic showed. Mark violated the protective order. He didn't approach Ariana. He went to the house. The one he and Ariana had shared. He forced entry. Security cameras caught everything. Furniture overturned, walls vandalized. Spray paint scrawled across the living room. "Liar, you belong to me. This isn't over." Commander Miller called me at midnight. "He's back in custody," he said. "For how long?" "Longer this time." I drove to the property early the next morning. Ariana insisted on coming. When we stepped inside, the house looked like a storm had passed through it. But it wasn't a storm. It was rage. Calculated rage. Ariana stood in the middle of the destroyed living room. "He never wanted the house," she whispered. "He wanted ownership." "Yes," I said quietly, and ownership had just been revoked. As we stood there, Ariana did something unexpected. She took off her wedding ring. She placed it on the overturned dining table. I'm done being afraid, she said, not dramatic, not loud, just certain. And in that moment, I realized something. The smear campaigns, the audits, the complaints, they weren't breaking her, they were clarifying her, but clarity is dangerous. Because when a victim stops doubting herself, the abuser loses leverage. And someone like Helen Harrison does not lose quietly. By the time we returned home, another envelope was waiting on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, photographs of my house taken from across the street. And a single handwritten note. Everyone has a breaking point. I stared at the message, then I folded it calmly, because here's what Helen didn't understand. I had already reached mine, and when I reach a breaking point, I don't collapse. I counterattack, but what I discovered the following week about Ray Harrison's final night was darker than even I expected, and it would change the direction of this entire war. The photographs did not frighten me, they confirmed something. Someone was nervous. The envelope had been delivered by hand. No postage, no return address, just a silent message placed at my doorstep in the middle of the night. Everyone has a breaking point. I placed the photographs on my desk under the lamp and studied them carefully. 3 angles of my house, one from across the street, one from the side yard, one closer, zoomed toward my front window. The timestamp was visible in the corner, 11:42 p.m. while Ariana and I had been inside. Mark was in custody. That left one person with motive and nerve, Helen Harrison. The next morning, Commander Miller stood in my kitchen examining the prints. She's escalating, he said. She's adjusting, I corrected. Escalation implies panic. This is calculation. He nodded slowly. We can increase patrols around your house. Do it, I said, but I don't want visible theatrics. She feeds off spectacle. He gave me a look that said he understood. Ariana came downstairs quietly. She looked tired, but something in her posture had shifted. Less folded, more vertical. Are we safe? She asked. Yes, I said evenly, but safety is layered. Physical safety is one thing, reputational safety is another. And Helen had been attacking both. By afternoon, another development surfaced. My firm's largest corporate client called. Elena, the CEO said carefully, we value you. But this controversy, we need to distance ourselves temporarily. Temporarily, which means until you either win publicly or disappear quietly. I understand, I replied calmly. When I hung up, I allowed myself one long breath. Helen wasn't trying to scare me, she was trying to exhaust me. Financial pressure, professional isolation, public narrative control, and surveillance, 4 fronts. She underestimated one thing. I had built my entire career navigating hostile divorces and vindictive litigants. This wasn't new terrain. That evening, Commander Miller called again. We've obtained more details from Ray Harrison's file, he said. I closed my study door. I'm listening. The paramedic who responded that night gave an initial statement that Ray had defensive wounds. My pulse slowed. Defensive? Bruising on his forearms. As if he had blocked something. And that was ruled a fall? Yes, very quickly. Who signed the report? Judge Henry Harrison, Mark's uncle, Helen's brother-in-law. Family protects family, even if it means burying the truth. Was there ever a domestic disturbance call from that address? I asked. 2, he said quietly. My fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. Before the death, yes. Were they documented as mutual disputes? Yes, mutual. The most abused word in domestic reports? I stared at the wall for a long moment. Helen didn't just normalize violence, she survived it, or she perpetrated it, or both. And now she had raised a son who believed control was inherited. That night, Ariana came into my study holding something in her hand. I forgot, she said softly. It was a small black flash drive. Mark gave this to me last Christmas, she said. He told me to keep it safe. Have you ever opened it? No, we inserted it into my laptop. A single folder appeared. Inside were scanned financial records, offshore accounts, transfers from a charitable foundation in Helen Harrison's name to a private trust. The beneficiary listed Mark Harrison. The transfer dates began the month after Ray Harrison died. My mind assembled the pieces quietly. Insurance payout, charity funnel, private trust, family judge signing off quickly, violence covered, money moved. Mom, Ariana whispered. This isn't just about you, I said. For the first time, fear entered her eyes. What do? We document everything, I said calmly. The following morning, I requested certified copies of the foundation's filings. By afternoon, someone leaked a story to the press. Prominent attorney under review for conflict of interest. My name was in the headline, not Mark's, not Helen's, mine. The comments section was brutal. Ambitious women ruin families, trying to profit off her daughter's drama. Helen had chosen her battlefield. Public opinion, she believed pressure would force retreat. That evening, my phone rang again. Helen, I answered. You're digging into things that don't concern you, she said softly. Everything concerning my daughter concerns me. You should focus on protecting your career. My career can withstand sunlight. Some things don't survive exposure, she replied. Like what? I asked. Silence. Then you don't know what you're touching? I think I do, her voice lowered. You think you're the first woman to challenge this family? The statement hung there, not defensive, informative. That was the moment I understood. There had been others. Before Ariana, before the dinner, before the applause. How many? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. Instead, she said something colder. Mark will be released tomorrow. I didn't react. On bail, she added. Protective order still stands, I said evenly. For now, she replied. She hung up. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because I was calculating. If Mark was out on bail, he would attempt contact. Not directly. Indirectly, pressure, provocation, testing the line. The next afternoon, he did exactly that. A courier delivered a package to Ariana. Inside was a framed photograph of their wedding day, the glass shattered, and a note beneath it. You owe me loyalty. Ariana's hands trembled slightly as she held it. I don't feel scared, she said quietly. Good, I replied. What do you feel? She looked at me carefully. Angry. That was progress because fear paralyses. Anger mobilizes. Later that evening, Commander Miller called again. We've interviewed Ray Harrison's former neighbor, he said, and she reported hearing screaming the night before his death. Male or female? Male. Silence stretched between us. And she said she heard a woman yell, "Don't touch me." I closed my eyes briefly. Ray Harrison may not have been the abuser, he may have been the one trying to leave. And Helen may have rewritten the story. Just as she was attempting to rewrite Ariana's. Patterns, control, narrative manipulation, financial secrecy, and generational violence. The dinner had been the visible crack, but this family had fractures long before Ariana entered it. That night, I sat with Ariana in the living room. Mom, she said quietly, if she could cover up something that big, what will she do to protect Mark? I looked at her steadily. She'll do whatever she believes she can get away with. And if she believes she can get away with anything, then she's about to learn she can't. Ariana leaned back against the couch. I used to think Helen was just strict, she whispered. She isn't strict, I said. She's strategic. And strategy without conscience is dangerous. The next morning, a development came that neither of us expected. A woman called my office. Her voice trembled. Is this Alina Vance? Yes. My name is Claire Benson, she said quietly. I used to date Mark Harrison. I didn't speak. I saw the news, she continued. And I think you should know something. The room went still. What? I asked calmly. He did the same thing to me. My pulse didn't race, it sharpened. When? I asked. 5 years ago, I never reported it. Helen told me no one would believe me. There it was, not an isolated dinner. Not a sudden loss of temper, a pattern, a lineage, and suddenly this wasn't a family conflict. It was a history of violence wrapped in influence. I ended the call slowly and looked at Ariana. It's bigger than we thought, I said. Her eyes widened. How much bigger? Big enough, I replied, that Helen Harrison might finally lose control. And when a woman who survives on control begins to lose it, she doesn't retreat, she detonates. And something told me the detonation was coming sooner than we expected. I didn't go home after leaving Ariana's house that night. I went straight to my office. It was nearly 10 p.m. when I unlocked the door. The hallway lights flickered on one by one, the building almost completely empty. I've always preferred working late. Fewer interruptions, fewer emotions in the air. But that night, it wasn't paperwork I was thinking about. It was my daughter. Ariana Vance, my only child. The girl I raised after Robert Vance, my late husband, passed away when she was 12. The girl who used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms and whisper, "You'll always protect me, right?" I had said yes. And tonight I had watched her get struck at a dinner table while Helen Harrison, her mother-in-law, smiled. I closed my office door and sat down at my desk. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was pull up Mark Harrison's name in the public records database. Mark Harrison, my son-in-law, Ariana's husband, the man who claimed he lost control because she provoked him. Men like Mark always think their history is invisible. It never is. Within minutes, I found the first thread. A noise complaint 2 years ago. Police responded. No arrest. The note read, verbal disturbance. No visible injuries. I leaned back in my chair slowly. 2 years ago. That meant it hadn't started tonight. It meant I had walked into an ongoing situation. My phone buzzed. Ariana, I answered immediately. Mom, her voice was low. Careful, I'm here. There was a pause. I could hear movement in the background. Mark's asleep, she whispered. Are you safe? Yes. I didn't fully believe her, but I let her continue. I'm sorry about tonight. The words stopped me. You're sorry for making it awkward, for you having to see that. My hand tightened around the phone. Ariana, I said slowly, carefully, what happened tonight was not awkward. Silence. It was violence. She inhaled sharply. He didn't mean to. No, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. He meant to. Another silence. Longer this time. You don't understand how hard it's been for him, she said quietly. Work is stressful. His mother keeps pressuring him. He snaps sometimes. There it was, the defense, the rationalization, the minimization. I had heard it before in courtrooms, in client meetings. In sworn testimony from women who once believed what she was trying to believe. Did this happen before? I asked. No response. Ariana, a faint exhale. Yes. How many times? I don't know. That meant many. Does Helen know? She says it's normal for couples to argue. That's not arguing. She says I'm too sensitive. I closed my eyes for a moment. Helen Harrison, Mark's mother. The woman who had sat at the head of the table and said, that's how she learns. That wasn't ignorance. That was endorsement. Ariana, I said carefully, has he ever left bruises? Yes. Have you documented them? No. Why? I didn't think I'd need to. That's what they always think. I shifted in my chair. Listen to me very carefully, I said. Tomorrow morning, you're going to take photos of any marks on your body. You're going to email them to me, not text. Email. She didn't argue. Okay, and you're going to pack a bag. Silence again. For what? In case you need to leave quickly. Mom, in case. She swallowed. I could hear it. What are you going to do? I looked at the open file on my screen, Mark's name. That prior complaint. I'm going to prepare. For what? For the possibility that he does this again. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the question that told me everything. Are you going to ruin his life? I almost laughed. Ruin his life? No, I said evenly. I'm going to protect yours. After we hung up, I didn't sit still. I called Commander Miller. He answered on the second ring. Alina? His voice was steady as always. I need information, I said. Is this professional or personal? Both. A brief pause. That's usually complicated. It is. I gave him Mark's full name. I need to know if there are any prior domestic complaints, unofficial reports, patrol notes. Anything that wouldn't show in a standard search. He didn't ask why. He trusted me enough not to. I'll see what I can find, he said. Quietly. Understood. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the darkened office window. For years, I had represented women in situations like this. I knew the stages: denial, justification, isolation, escalation, and tonight I had seen escalation. The next morning, my inbox pinged 3 photos from Ariana. Bruises on her upper arm, a faint swelling near her cheek, finger marks. I stared at them for a long time, then I saved them. 2 hours later, Commander Miller called back. There's more, he said without preamble. My stomach tightened. Go on. 3 months before he married your daughter, there was another complaint. I froze. From whom? Previous partner. Woman declined to press charges, said it was a misunderstanding. Of course she did. Was his mother involved? I asked. Showed up at the station, Miller replied. Insisted her son was being falsely accused. Helen Harrison, protecting her son, enabling him, reinforcing him. How far can this go if Ariana files? I asked. If there's documentation, prior patterns, witness testimony, very far. I looked at the bruise photos again. It may not be her filing, I said quietly. There was silence on his end. "Alina," he said carefully, "be careful. If you move without her consent, you could push her further into isolation." He was right. I knew he was right. This wasn't a courtroom. This was my daughter's life. "I won't force her," I said, but I won't stand by." That afternoon, I drove to Ariana's house unannounced. Helen answered the door. "Alina," she said smoothly, "you should have called." "I prefer surprises." She smiled faintly. Mark wasn't home. Ariana stood behind her in the hallway. Her eyes flickered toward me, hope and fear mixed together. "I'd like to speak with my daughter alone," I said. Helen hesitated. "She's my daughter," I added evenly. That ended the hesitation. Inside Ariana's bedroom, I closed the door gently. She sat on the edge of the bed. "He's been calmer today," she said quickly. "They always are." She looked down. "I don't want a scandal," she whispered. "This isn't about scandal. It'll destroy everything." "No," I said, "his actions will." She stared at her hands. "What if he changes? What if he doesn't?" Silence. I stepped closer. "Ariana, I need you to answer me honestly." She nodded. "If I hadn't been there last night, if no one had seen it, would it have been worse?" Her eyes filled. "Yes." That was enough. I didn't need more. Because the next time might not be at dinner, it might not have witnesses, it might not stop at a shove, and Helen would still smile. I stood up slowly. "I'm going to give you time," I said. "For what? To decide whether you want protection or forgiveness." She looked up at me. "And if I choose forgiveness," I met her eyes, "then I will still be here." I walked out of that house with something heavier than anger, certainty. Mark thought last night was a warning. Helen thought it was discipline. They both believed I would react emotionally. They were wrong, because the next move wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be dramatic, it would be strategic. And when it came, Mark Harrison would realize he hadn't just struck my daughter at dinner. He had triggered something far more dangerous. He had triggered me. The house in the hills did not feel like a home anymore. It felt like a crime scene that hadn't finished speaking. After everything that had unfolded, the police reports, the documented threats, Ariana finally admitting the truth, Mark Harrison was out on conditional release pending formal charges. The court had set restrictions. A temporary protective order was in place. Commander Miller had assured me we were being monitored. But Helen Harrison, my daughter's mother-in-law, was not restricted in the same way. And that made her far more dangerous. Ariana had moved back into my house temporarily. My house. The one Robert Vance and I built together 27 years ago. The one filled with rosemary in the garden and his architectural sketches in the study. My late husband, Robert Vance, had always said, "When something breaks, Alina, you fix the foundation first." That's what I was doing. One evening, about 2 weeks after the dinner, Ariana was sitting at the kitchen counter. She looked exhausted but clearer. The fog of denial was lifting. "Mom," she said quietly, "Helen called me today." My body went still. What did she say? She said I embarrassed the family, that I ruined Mark's future, that a wife should handle problems privately. Of course she did. Helen Harrison had applauded while her son struck my daughter. That image still lived in my mind like a scar. "What else?" I asked. She said if I loved Mark, I would help him. She said prison would destroy him and that I would have his failure on my conscience. Classic manipulation. I didn't respond immediately. I let Ariana speak. "She also said," Ariana continued, voice trembling slightly, "that I've always been dramatic, that I exaggerate, that maybe I misinterpreted what happened." Gaslighting. Helen wasn't trying to protect her son. She was trying to protect control. I reached across the counter and took Ariana's hand. "You did not misinterpret being hit," I said calmly. "You did not misinterpret being shoved to the floor. You did not misinterpret applause." Ariana's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't confused tears. They were angry ones. That was progress. The next morning, I met Commander Miller at the station. Commander Miller had been my professional contact for years, disciplined, measured, not easily shaken. He listened carefully as I explained Helen's continued interference. "She's not violating the order directly," he said. "She's careful, but the pattern is clear." "Pattern matters," I replied, "especially in domestic cases." He nodded. "We're building something solid, Alina, but you need to prepare. This won't end quietly." I already knew that. Meanwhile, Mark Harrison began sending formal statements through his attorney. Apologies, claims of stress, references to marital misunderstandings. But one thing was missing from every statement. Responsibility. He never once said, I chose to hit her. It was always, I lost control. I was overwhelmed. It wasn't intentional. Language matters, and I knew how juries hear it. That night, Ariana surprised me. I want to go back to the house, she said. I looked up sharply. Why? I don't want to feel like I'm running. I want my things, and I want to see it. I want to know I'm not afraid of it. I studied her carefully. Fear wasn't in her voice. Resolve was. So the next afternoon, accompanied by 2 officers arranged by Commander Miller, Ariana and I returned to the house in the hills. Mark was not allowed within 500 meters, that was clear. But Helen Harrison was standing outside when we arrived. Of course she was. Elegant coat, perfect posture, controlled expression. Elena, she said as if greeting me at a charity gala. Helen, Ariana stepped slightly behind me instinctively. That alone told me everything. Helen looked at her. You look thin, she said. Stress doesn't suit you. I didn't take the bait. We're here for Ariana's belongings, I said evenly. Nothing more. Helen's lips curved slightly. You've escalated this far beyond what it needed to be. Families argue, wives make mistakes, husbands react. It doesn't mean lives should be destroyed. There it was again, justification. Your son committed assault, I replied calmly, and you encouraged it. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes, not shame, annoyance. You've always been dramatic, Elena. Even at the wedding, I could tell you enjoyed control. I stepped closer. Control, I said softly, is applauding violence and calling it discipline. Silence. Ariana's breathing steadied behind me. Helen shifted tactics. You think prison fixes men like Mark? It hardens them. When he comes out, he will hate her. That was not a prediction. It was a threat disguised as advice. Commander Miller had warned me she might escalate. I turned to Ariana. Let's go inside. The officers followed us in. The house felt hollow. Broken glass had been cleaned, furniture upright, but something in the air had changed. Ariana walked slowly through the living room. Touched the dining table where that night happened. Her shoulders squared. He doesn't own this memory, she said quietly. That sentence told me she was healing. Upstairs, she packed quietly. Clothes, documents, personal items, no tears. Just clarity. As we were leaving, Helen stood at the base of the stairs. You'll regret this, she said to Ariana. Ariana paused. Then she did something I will never forget. She walked down those stairs, stood directly in front of her mother-in-law. No, Ariana said calmly. You regret this. Not loud, not emotional, certain. Helen had no answer for certainty. We left. That night I sat alone in Robert's study, his photo on the desk. I think she's coming back, I said softly to the empty room. I think she's really coming back. Robert Vance had always believed strength wasn't loud, it was steady. The next day, new information surfaced. Commander Miller called. We pulled additional records from previous noise complaints at the house, he said. Neighbors reported arguments multiple times over the last year. Ariana had never told me because she had been protecting the illusion. Build it, I said, all of it. We are. Mark's attorney reached out that afternoon proposing mediation, not reconciliation, damage control. They offered reduced charges in exchange for dropping additional filings. I declined without hesitation. Helen had miscalculated something fundamental. She assumed fear would wear us down, but fear had already peaked that night at dinner. Now we were operating in daylight, and daylight changes everything. That evening, Ariana joined me in the garden. The rosemary smelled strong, Robert's favorite. Mom, she said, I keep replaying that night. That's normal. I don't replay the slaps anymore. I looked at her carefully. What do you replay? You standing up, taking out your phone, not yelling, not crying, just calling. She swallowed. That's the moment that changed everything. I smiled faintly. It wasn't dramatic, I said. It was powerful. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Ariana added, I don't feel small anymore. That was the real victory, not the court case, not the public image, not even prison. It was that sentence. But as the night settled in, I felt something else beneath the calm. Helen Harrison had lost control publicly, and people who thrive on control rarely retreat quietly. They regroup, and I already had a feeling she wasn't finished. If you think the hardest part of standing up to violence is the moment you speak, wait until you see what happens after. Because sometimes the real war begins after you refuse to kneel. Retaliation did not come as shouting. It came as silence. 3 days after our visit to the house in the hills, the silence began. Ariana Vance noticed it first. She had gone to her office, her first full week back at work since the dinner. She was determined not to let what Mark Harrison did define her career. That evening, she walked into my kitchen and placed her purse down slowly. "Something's wrong," she said. I looked up from the files I was reviewing. "What happened?" "My access card didn't work this morning." I felt my stomach tighten. "And HR called me in before lunch." There it was. "They said there have been concerns raised about my stability, that the company needs to protect its image." My jaw tightened. "Concerns raised by who?" Ariana didn't answer immediately, but we both knew. Helen Harrison, Mark's mother. A woman who clapped while her son struck my daughter would not hesitate to whisper lies into boardrooms. "They didn't fire me," Ariana continued, "but they placed me on temporary leave pending internal review." Internal review. Corporate language for "we don't want controversy attached to our brand." I kept my voice steady. "Did they mention the police report?" "Yes, they said it's unfortunate publicity." Publicity. As if my daughter's bruises were marketing material. That night I called Commander Miller. "They're moving socially," I told him. He sighed on the other end. "We anticipated that. Do we have proof Helen contacted the company?" "Not yet. But we're watching her communications. She's careful." Of course she was. Helen Harrison didn't explode. She orchestrated. The next blow came 48 hours later. A blogger published an article questioning false allegations in high-profile families. No names mentioned directly, but details were unmistakable. Age, neighborhood, a mother who was a lawyer. They were planting doubt. Helen wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to win socially. That night, Ariana sat across from me at the dining table, the same table in my house where Robert Vance once graded architectural sketches and teased us about overcooked roast. "I feel like I'm shrinking again," she admitted quietly. I leaned forward. "Look at me." She did. "You are not shrinking, you are being pressured. There's a difference." Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. "I don't want to be the woman people whisper about." "You're not," I said firmly. "You're the woman who survived." But I understood something crucial in that moment. Helen was attacking Ariana's identity. And identity attacks can be more destabilizing than physical ones. 2 days later, retaliation escalated. Commander Miller called me at 6:40 a.m. "Are you home?" "Yes." "Do not panic. A complaint was filed against you with the Bar Association." I went still. "On what grounds?" "Conflict of interest, abuse of influence, allegations that you manipulated law enforcement due to personal connections." Helen. She was attacking my license now, my career, my credibility. "Who filed it?" "It's anonymous," Commander Miller said, "but the paperwork was delivered by a private firm linked to the Harrison family." So now she was widening the battlefield. That evening, Ariana found me in Robert's old study. For the first time since the dinner, I looked tired. "Mom," she said softly, "it's fine." "It's not fine." I leaned back in the chair Robert once used. "This is what abusers do when they lose control inside the home. They attempt control outside it." Ariana walked closer. "Is your license at risk?" "Not if the truth holds." "But what if it doesn't?" There it was, fear creeping back in. I stood. "Ariana, listen carefully. Helen Harrison's strategy is exhaustion. She believes if she applies pressure long enough, we'll fold." "And will we?" "No." Not loud, not dramatic, certain. The following week, something unexpected happened. Mark Harrison requested a meeting through his attorney, not reconciliation, not negotiation, a meeting. I refused immediately, but Ariana surprised me. "I want to see him," she said. My heart dropped. "Why?" "Because I need to look at him without fear. I need to know I'm not shaking anymore." We arranged it formally through Commander Miller, controlled setting, supervised. The detention room was sterile, cold. Fluorescent lights. Mark looked different, thinner, unshaven, less composed. When he saw Ariana, something cracked in his expression. "Ari," he whispered. She didn't sit immediately. She remained standing. "You don't get to call me that," he swallowed. "I messed up." "No," Ariana said calmly. "You chose." Silence. "I was under pressure," he said. "You were under ego." He blinked. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." "More than once?" He looked down. "Mom says," Ariana cut him off. "This is the first time you will not finish a sentence with her name." That landed. Mark's shoulders shifted. I'm not my mother. Ariana stepped closer. You are exactly your mother, that's the problem. He flinched. You think I don't know she's orchestrating this? Ariana continued. The blog posts, the HR complaints, the rumors. He didn't deny it. Tell her to stop, Ariana said. Mark's eyes lifted. I can't. There it was, truth. He wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. Helen was. You see, Ariana said quietly, you never controlled anything. You were always an extension of her. His silence confirmed it. Ariana walked out without shaking, without tears. When she reached me in the hallway, her breathing was steady. How do you feel? I asked. Done, she said. And for the first time, I believed her. But Helen Harrison was not done. 2 nights later, our security system alerted at 1:12 am motion near the garden. Commander Miller arrived within minutes. We reviewed footage. A car had slowed outside my house. Lights off, lingering, no direct approach, just watching, intimidation without contact. Is it her? Ariana whispered. We don't know, Commander Miller said. But the timing is not coincidence. I looked at the screen again. Helen didn't scream. She stalked. The next morning, I received official notice. The Bar Association would hold a preliminary review. Helen was forcing institutional pressure. Ariana saw the letter on the table. I did this to you, she said softly. No, I replied instantly. Mark did. She shook her head. If I had stayed silent, you would still be getting hit. Silence. Then something shifted in her face. Resolve. I'm not staying silent, she said. What are you thinking? I want to release a statement. Publicly, controlled, factual. Calm, Helen had been whispering. We would speak clearly. No insults, no dramatics, just truth. Commander Miller advised caution. But legally, Ariana had the right. The statement was short. She confirmed the incident. Confirmed the police involvement. Confirmed she stood by her testimony. No personal attacks, no emotional language, just facts. The response was immediate. Support flooded in. Colleagues who had been quiet reached out privately. A former professor publicly defended her. The narrative began shifting. Helen had underestimated something. Transparency. You cannot manipulate shadows once someone turns on the light, but that doesn't mean she stopped trying. Because 3 days later, something happened that none of us expected. Mark Harrison violated the protective order, not physically, digitally. A direct message from a new number appeared on Ariana's phone. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. Commander Miller was informed immediately. Violation documented. Mark claimed it was emotional distress. The judge did not care. Bond conditions tightened. Helen's control was weakening. And when control weakens, desperation grows. That night, sitting in the garden, Ariana asked me something quietly. Mom, do you think she's scared? Helen Harrison? Yes, I considered it carefully. For the first time in her life, I said, she doesn't control the ending. Ariana nodded slowly. Good, but I knew something she didn't. People like Helen don't retreat into fear, they double down. And something in my instincts sharpened over decades in courtrooms, told me that next would not be about whispers. It would be about exposure. Because when a woman who built her identity on control starts losing power, she either collapses or she reveals everything. The exposure did not come from us. It came from inside the Harrison family. 2 weeks after Mark Harrison violated the restraining order, Commander Miller called me again. Attorney Vance, he said, his tone different this time. We need you and Ariana at the station. What happened? We received a sworn statement. From who? A pause. From someone very close to Helen Harrison. When Ariana and I arrived, Commander Miller handed me a folder. Inside were copies of bank transfers, old insurance policies, and one notarized affidavit. Helen Harrison's late husband, Ray Harrison, had increased his life insurance coverage 6 months before his death. The beneficiary, Helen, but that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the attached timeline. The policy adjustment had been signed the same week Ray consulted a divorce attorney. The affidavit was from that attorney. He had kept notes, detailed notes. Ray had reported escalating verbal abuse, threats, financial control. Isolation. The attorney had recommended protective steps. Ray never returned. 3 weeks later, he was dead from a fall down the stairs. It was ruled an accident, Ariana whispered. Yes, Commander Miller replied. But this statement reopens motive. Who sent it? I asked. The attorney himself, he said. He retired years ago, said he couldn't sleep anymore after seeing what happened to Ariana on the news. Helen's past was catching up. Not because we hunted it, because truth, once stirred, rarely stays buried. Within days, the district attorney reopened Ray Harrison's case formally. Subpoenas were issued. Financial audits launched. Helen Harrison, for the first time, was not directing the narrative. She was reacting to it. The shift was visible immediately. The social blog posts stopped. The anonymous whispers dried up. The car that used to slow outside my home, gone. Helen wasn't strategizing anymore. She was defending. And when the grand jury summoned her, she called me, not to threaten, to negotiate. "Attorney Vance," she said, her voice no longer syrup smooth. "We need to speak privately." "There is nothing private left," I answered. "You want justice? Fine, let's discuss terms." "There are no terms. You are ruining a legacy." "No," I replied calmly. "I am ending a pattern." Silence. "You think you've won?" she asked. "This was never about winning." "What then?" "Stopping you." The line went dead. 2 months later, indictments were issued, not only for obstruction and intimidation in Ariana's case, but for manslaughter in Ray Harrison's reopened file. The courtroom that day felt heavier than Mark's trial. Helen entered composed, pearls, perfect posture, but her eyes were sharp with calculation. Ariana squeezed my hand. "I'm not scared," she whispered. I looked at her, and she wasn't. That was the most profound change of all. The prosecution laid out the pattern clearly: financial control of Ray Harrison, escalating abuse, life insurance increase, divorce consultation, death under suspicious circumstances, rapid case closure due to family connections. Helen's defense claimed coincidence, poor memory, old grief, but then the retired attorney testified, steady voice, unshaken. "I believed Mr. Ray Harrison was afraid of his wife." That sentence shifted the room. The jury listened differently after that, and when Helen took the stand, she made the mistake powerful people often make. She underestimated ordinary people. She smirked once, just once. When questioned about Ariana, that smirk cost her, because juries recognize contempt. And 3 weeks later, the verdict came: guilty on obstruction, guilty on conspiracy to intimidate a witness, guilty on manslaughter related to Ray Harrison's death. 12 years. Helen Harrison did not scream this time. She went still, like a queen dethroned in slow motion. As officers placed cuffs around her wrists, she looked directly at Ariana. Not with rage, not with tears, with disbelief, as if she truly never imagined this outcome. Ariana did not look away. She held that gaze, steady, unmoved. And in that quiet exchange, something closed. Mark Harrison's case concluded shortly after. With Helen convicted and the digital violations documented, his sentence remained firm. 5 years, mandatory therapy. Permanent restraining order, no contact, no negotiation, no appeal strong enough to undo it. When it was finally over, Ariana and I sat in my garden, the same garden Robert Vance once tended on Sunday afternoons. The rosemary had grown thick, the thyme steady, the air felt different, lighter. "It's quiet," Ariana said. "Yes. I forgot what quiet feels like." Quiet without tension, without bracing, without waiting for the next strike. Weeks passed. Ariana returned to work, a new firm this time, smaller, healthier culture. Her new supervisor knew the full story, and instead of distancing, he said something simple: "You're brave." That word stayed with her. She started sleeping again. Started laughing easily, started meeting friends without glancing at her phone every 10 minutes. One evening she came home and sat across from me. "Mom," she said, "I want to volunteer." "For what?" "For women who don't know where to start." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had built a career defending strangers. Now my daughter wanted to stand beside them too. "You don't have to carry everyone's fight," I told her. "I'm not carrying," she said gently. "I'm guiding." Robert would have been proud. I see that clearly now. Months later, Ariana made one more decision. She sold the house in the hills, the house that had held both dreams and damage. She kept nothing from it. Not a lamp, not a dish, not even the curtains. "It doesn't own me anymore," she said when she signed the paperwork, and she meant it. The final closure came unexpectedly. A letter arrived from prison, from Mark, short, handwritten. He admitted therapy had forced him to confront something uncomfortable. He had never questioned his mother, never challenged her version of love. He wrote that he understood now that control felt like safety because it was all he had seen growing up. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he didn't demand a response, he simply said, "I see it now." Ariana folded the letter calmly. "I don't hate him," she said. "That's strength," I replied. "No," she corrected softly. "That's freedom." 5 years have passed since that dinner. 5 years since my son-in-law struck my daughter. 5 years since his mother clapped and said, "That's how she learns." 5 years since I stood up, took out my phone, and made one call. That call did more than bring police. It broke a cycle, it exposed a history, it ended a dynasty built on fear, and it rebuilt a life. Ariana now walks differently, head high, shoulders relaxed. When she laughs, it's full, unrestricted. And when she visits me on Sundays, we sometimes cook roast in Robert's memory, not because we are holding onto the past, but because we survived it. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this: violence thrives in silence. Control survives in secrecy. But the moment someone stands up calmly, clearly, without theatrics, and makes that one call, everything shifts. They had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with, not because I was a lawyer, not because I had connections, but because I was a mother who refused to look away. And that is a force stronger than fear. If you are listening and something inside you recognizes this story, know this: the first step is not loud. It is not dramatic, it is often just a decision. A decision to stop accepting, a decision to speak, a decision to act. Sometimes it's one call, and sometimes that one call changes everything.